We're live, Chair.
Thank you, Anne. Well, good morning, everybody. Good to see you. So I start off with, are there any apologies? I don't believe there are.
No, Chair, we haven't had any. I do believe that Councillor Wick will be joining the meeting in a bit.
Okay, that's good. Now, declarations of interest. Are there any declarations of interest for the issues discussed? No?
No.
Okay, so I think we can proceed on to minutes of the last meeting. No, where are we? Oh. Where are we? No. Right. So yeah, see, so it's what's that? That's pages 3 to 6, I believe. Any issues on page 3, please?
Chair.
Yep.
Sorry, I don't think I've got page numbers on here, but it's a front page essentially.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it was a matter arising from the minutes on the 13th of December when we were talking about information about submission of petitions.
Yeah.
And we were hoping for an update in January, and we were told that officers would put forward their findings when in receipt of further information now, and I just wondered if they've done any work and whether we can expect one at our next meeting.
Right. Petitions are covered in the in the issues we're discussing today, aren't they? They're the receipt of petitions.
It's in the draft guidance, Chair, which has only just come through, which is why it's included in your agenda. But what we intend doing at the next meeting is presenting a more detailed report in terms of the option. But yes, as that guidance has only just come through in terms of what the expectation is with petition schemes generally, then it was too late to bring it to this meeting. But in answer to Councillor Evans' question, we'll bring an options paper next time in terms of what that could look like.
Thank you.
Okay, thanks. Right, so where were we? Page 3 for the page 4. I take it it's a bit pointless me saying this if you haven't got page numbers. No. And then there'll be 5 and 6. Basically, are you content with the minutes as they're there in total, please, one and all? Yeah, I think yep. Kate's nodding, and everybody else seems to have cleared their cameras. So I'll assume that we're all content with the minutes. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. All right then. There we are. Okay. So. Yeah, I take it the minutes are accepted. I don't think I have to get a vote for that. Right, so that will take us on to the first item, which is members induction training.
Thank you, Chair, committee members. So can you see my presentation? Is that being shared?
Yeah.
Great.
Yep.
Okay, so today I've come to update you on the member induction programme and run through the proposal that's planned for post-May elections. So the purpose of bringing it to the committee is to share the plans for your review and comments. Excuse me, I'm just trying to find the button to move forward. It doesn't seem to be responding. There we are. So there is some legislation and guidance that we're following in bringing together the curriculum. So under the Local Government Wales Measure 2011 and the Local Government and Elections Wales Act 2021, there are legislative requirements for corporate governance and the support and development in place for members. The WLGA has also done quite a bit of work on a framework that outlines the curriculum for members in Wales. They've produced a comprehensive guide on what should be considered when developing local programmes. There's also a development framework for members and a charter for member support and development in Wales. So these are competency frameworks and focus on supporting improved practice by developing the skills and knowledge of members. So the principles for delivery of the member induction programme is around less is more. So whilst there is a lot of information that does need to be conveyed, trying to make that as concise as possible and focusing on the information needed at any particular time so that members are not overwhelmed all of a short period. It is also aimed at being member centred, so trying to focus on the needs of the members and fulfilling those gaps where required, and also looking at different roles so it becomes individualised. So whilst there are mandatory modules included as part of the curriculum, the focus is on what each individual member may need as part of committees, as part of their defined roles, and trying to support that. Obviously, really important when delivering training is trying to make it as engaging and interactive as possible, so that it's easier to retain the information and move forward with the training as and when. So again, focusing on how we can make this as accessible as possible for members. So something that was a benefit really, although we wouldn't have chosen to do it this way through the pandemic, was the increase in digital access. So there are a lot more e-learning modules that have been developed as part of the curriculum this year. So I think there's always a place for face-to-face workshops, and certainly particular topics really need that support. But the e-learning modules are there for some of the topics, and they're also a really good backup. So if there's a time when members may need to go back and check something, may need to refresh themselves throughout that 5-year term, they can access the e-learning modules at any time that suits them. It's also about having effective trainers in place. So some of these are subject matter experts that are already working at the council, but where appropriate, we would be engaging with external providers and getting them to come in and provide the training. So methods of delivery, I've touched on this a little bit. The support is available in a number of formats. So we have the induction pack, which you'll all be used to receiving. And we're trying to deliver that in a different way this year, trying to make it again accessible online so that members can go back and refer to anything that they're not sure of throughout the term. There is the formal training, so making sure that there is a place for that and the face-to-face workshops. The e-learning modules, as I say, touched on that, and I think one of the things we've learned over the past 2 years is that the member seminars, they're quite easy to run online, and they do attract good participation, good level of participation. So trying to think about using that learning when we implement this curriculum. We've talked a little bit already about the internal and external provision, so using our experts in-house, but also making use of experts that we need to procure and get in place to support members where needed. And then there's also some of the opportunities then to learn from observation and learning on the job, so to speak. And there's a coaching and mentoring framework, which WLGA are developing as well. So key dates here are Thursday the 5th of May is the election itself, the polling day. The next day then will be holding the verification and count in line with most local authorities in Wales. Then the next meeting, the first annual general meeting, is on the 17th of May. So that gives 6 clear working days between the verification and count and the annual general meeting. So that is quite a tight timescale to turn around. We are aware that there are a number of members that might not be standing for re-election this year. So there'll be, some members which have never served before and they'll be brand new to the role. So that's quite a big undertaking in that first week to provide the core induction, code of conduct, get the equipment and login details that they're going to require, and really prepare all members ready for that AGM. Important to note as well, committee, that the AGM is going to be a hybrid meeting AGM. So where we've talked about this for some time, again required under the Local Government and Elections Act, we will be running that as a hybrid meeting, and we need to make sure that we're providing the training necessary for all members to be comfortable and able to participate in that first meeting. So following on from that, which is going to be a really busy period, we've got the first month, which will be focusing then on key legislation and preparation for members who might be part of committees going forward. The first quarter, again, we would widen out the legislation and policy that we look at and try to develop skills to support community work. And then going on from that would be further legislation, community work and skills and development. So again, trying to think of that principle of having the right information at the right time, so that members are supported to fulfil their roles and duties. So this is the first week. What we've tried to do is break it down into the course itself, what the description of that course is, who the audience is. Was it intended for all members, or is it intended for a particular group or role? Whether it's mandatory or optional, and the method of delivery. So you'll notice in the method of delivery, some of these might be run in a number of different ways. So you might have information in the induction pack and a face-to-face workshop, and there might be an e-learning module to support that as well. So we've got things like the ICT induction, really important if we want members to be online and logging in for that first AGM, code of conduct, introduction to the role and local government in general. Some orientation, so if we're thinking about particularly new members, you know, how they navigate around the bits that they may need to access in the civic, COVID restrictions permitting. And then the governance, which is going to be really important, as we've talked about before at the committee. The constitution is due to be reviewed, and there will be some changes with that. And then general meeting participation. So, you know, we have made a shift to digital working, and members are now quite comfortable with accessing meetings online, but we do need to make sure that we are looking at that, particularly with a view to the hybrid meetings being introduced following the election. Then it broadens out into the first month, so introduction to all the service areas, the structure, key policies and delivery, equality and diversity, Welsh Language Act and local standards, Wellbeing and Future Generations Act, and then focusing on some of the committees like planning, licensing and the scrutiny committees. I've left the scrutiny committees grey at the moment, just because we're thinking about the structure that is changing within the council itself. And then that might need some rearranging in terms of the structure of the committees going forward to look at their performance. Then it broadens out again, so training for chairing skills, safeguarding support and scrutiny training. And again, some of these are workshops and training that we've used in the past. I think the WLGA have some really excellent tools and services they provide in relation to this, so we'll be linking in with them. And then finally looking at that quarter running up to Christmas, so financials will be really important. That time will be going into the period of looking at the budgets and budget setting for the next year, so that treasury management and budgeting training will be really important. And again, it's about that timing, getting it at the right time. We'll also be looking at Social Care and Wellbeing Act, governance and audit, data management and FOI, personal safety and self-care for members, and using social media. So in summary, there are 32 modules in total, which I think sounds like a lot on the surface of it, but really important to remember that 16 of these are mandatory, but only 6 of these mandatory modules are for members appointed to certain committees. So I think if you were a member without specific roles or committee membership, there would be 10 in total that we would consider to be mandatory, and those are broken down over a period of time. So the first week it is going to be really important. It will be a bit of a hothouse to try and support members to get ready and on board, ready for the first AGM, but then following that the training is a bit more dispersed and easily manageable. But I think it is important to sort of press that point that that first week there is going to be a requirement for training to get ready for that AGM. And the other thing I think important to remember is this is around supporting members, so trying to give them the skills and support that they'll need to fulfil their roles and responsibilities throughout their term. Oh, apologies. And then the other thing to note, committee members, is the modules will be available on those multiple platforms. So there's a combination of face-to-face and having those workshops, so we can, you know, explore the conversations and adds that value. But then there will be some things that will be offering on e-learning. We will be looking at face-to-face, COVID permitting, We'll also be having a really comprehensive induction pack and signposting to other information that is of use. Thank you, Chair, members. That was the full presentation to share with you.
Okay. Thank you, Leanne. Thank you. Yeah. Well, committee, are there any thoughts on that? We'll start the ball rolling. No.
Councillor Watkins has indicated
Yes, Kate. Yes.
in the chat box.
Yeah.
Well,
Kate.
Councillor Watkins first.
Okay.
Oh, sorry. Sorry, I
thank
beg
you.
your pardon. Yeah. Oh, okay, sorry. I'm with you.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, Trevor. Yeah.
Okay, thank you, Chair. But I asked Leanne if all members of the Democratic Services have a copy of the presentation, please, so we can put it in the diary, you know, ready. That's it, of course, if we're reselected.
Of course, I think the part of the support for prospective candidates that we're looking at the moment that will be shared is, you know, some of this information about the training and what will be available to support members, as well as setting that expectation that for that first week it is going to be quite challenging. There will be a lot to you know, get your head around and get involved with, particularly coming into the civics, the equipment and that hybrid meeting training. So I think it is an important point, Councillor Watkins, that we make that clear as early as possible.
Yeah, because obviously possibly councillors and prospective councillors have possibly got holidays booked, and obviously they need to amend those, I would assume. Thank you, Leanne. Thank you, Chair.
And Councillor Hourihane.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Leanne, for your presentation. Very clear, thank you. On the mandatory modules, it's been reported back to our standards committee over the years that there were about 3 or 4, and Mr. Price may remember the actual number, of people who didn't participate in this mandatory module. And I'm wondering what the enforcement sanction would be coming up in the new council.
Well, do you want me to pick that one up, Chair?
Yes, please.
There are no enforcement sanctions. I mean, clearly with licensing and planning training, the rules are that if members don't complete the training, they can't serve on those committees. Unfortunately, with code of conduct training, there is no sanction. So that was the problem that we had with standards committee previously. There was a suggestion that it should have been included in the members' new declaration of acceptance of office, that they agreed to abide by the code. At the last meeting that we had with Welsh Government officials, the suggestion was that they wouldn't be changing the rules between now and May. So it's very much as you were in terms of the code of conduct. So I think we'll be in the same position as previously. The council has a policy that is mandatory. The Ombudsman requires all members to undertake the necessary training, but at the end of the day, we've got no means of compulsion. If you remember, what we did last time was that we put on a number of refresher or additional training sessions for those members, but ultimately the 3 members that hadn't attended, we sent them the information electronically and just asked that they read that. I mean, the one additional, and I wouldn't suggest it's an enforcement measure, but the one additional provision in the new legislation is that leaders of individual groups on the council have a personal responsibility to maintain ethical standards within their groups. So I think Standards Committee would expect the leaders of the individual groups to be making sure that their members do attend and to reinforce the message that the training is mandatory. But that's probably as far as we can go in terms of enforcing the mandatory training requirement.
Okay. Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Mr. Price.
Matthew, you're on the list as well.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. You know, it's great to see that less is more, and I think we'll all agree with that. There is a huge amount of information. Whoever comes in, even sort of members who've been there before, it can be incredibly overwhelming for people. Couple of points. First of all, I'm amazed that we're going to have the AGM as a hybrid meeting in May. I would have thought all restrictions would have been lifted a long time before that, and I think it's really important that one of the things you do is you can talk to other councillors or potential long-standing ones, and this almost sort of flies in the face of well, hold on a minute. The critical thing is talking and meeting people. Now, I don't know who took the decision. I certainly wasn't consulted. I don't even know if I'm going to be here, but it just seems a terrible example to be setting to people that you turn up at the civic centre and you want to talk to people. You want that face-to-face interaction. You want to be able to sort of ask questions to people of your own political parties. And just sticking it back online in May, middle of May, just seems terrible to me. I don't see why that decision was taken, because as far as I'm concerned, it's not something which I would support on the basis, well, we should be, well, hopefully, I mean, I don't know if I'm going to be back or not, or whoever's back. I don't know why that decision was taken. It doesn't seem right to me.
Can I explain that, Chair?
Yes, please do, Gareth.
There seems to be a misunderstanding about what we mean by hybrid meeting. We are assuming, for the purposes of those hybrid meetings, that all COVID restrictions will have been removed by May.
Yeah.
And in answer to Councillor Evans' point, if all 51 councillors want to come into the chamber, then we are assuming by that stage that they will be eligible and entitled to do so. So the requirement for a hybrid meeting is in the legislation. As we've explained before, we have to have hybrid meeting technology so that those members who want to dial in remotely, as opposed to come in for the face-to-face meeting, are able to do so. So that's what we will have up and running by the AGM in May, and there'll be no requirement for members to stay away or dial in remotely. If members want to come in, then subject to any restrictions, I mean, obviously we don't know what might change between now and the 17th of May, but we're assuming for planning purposes that both for mayor making and for the AGM, there will be no restrictions in terms of people coming into the civic or sitting in the council chamber. So all those members who want to come in and participate face-to-face in the council meeting will be able to do so. But there may be one or two who due to work and other maybe caring commitments are unable to get in to the council chamber. They will then be able to use the technology to dial in remotely. So it'll be a combination of what we've got now and the previous face-to-face council meetings.
I think it might have been the wording, because I'm pretty sure Leanne said it'll be a hybrid meeting, the AGM. So I think that's probably where the confusion.
But that's what we mean by hybrid meetings. Hybrid means it's a mixture of technology and face-to-face meetings, but depending upon personal choice rather than restriction.
Perhaps we could have a different word for it, because I'm confused by that. We'll be having an AGM face-to-face. If you want to dial in virtually, please do. So the only other point I wanted to raise was some of the e-learning courses we've been sent, particularly via the NHS ones, have been very difficult to log on to. Perhaps we could have some reassurance, and I'm pretty sure that members, I know certain people have given up about the passwords and logging in. Perhaps we could have some undertaking to ensure that it's quite straightforward for new members or members to log on to the e-learning courses, rather than to have a 17-digit password which seems to change or be forgotten each time you log on. Thank you.
Thanks, Cassie. Yeah, good point. We'll look into any issues that have been encountered about that and try and put something together.
Right, we've got Carmel.
Yeah, good morning, Chair. Thank you. Mainly, I was just going to support Matthew's view about hybrid meetings, but now that Mr. Price has explained what it is, I do know what hybrid means, but I prefer to be in the civic centre. I've actually had residents complaining about the fact that we don't yet meet in the council chamber. And they think it's a bit of a cop-out. So I can't wait to get back to meet people face to face and to even see all of you. So I don't like machine working. It's not conducive to easy talks, easy discussions, interruptions, anything that you do face to face. But that's just my view. But thank you very much, both of you, Mr. Price rather, for explaining what it is. Thank you.
Right. No, you didn't register electronically, Kate, but you did at one point wave your hand.
Thank you, Chair. It's okay. I think my question in large was dealt with by under the question which Phil asked you. So thank you.
Okay, well, I think that more or less concludes it. No more comments, no more observations, committee. I think that more or less concludes our thoughts on that topic.
In that case, before you move on, Chair, can I just sort of ask for a message really to be passed on? Leanne made the point that we've only got about 6 working days between the election and the AGM to get all of this essential training done, and we will be advising the candidates of that. But if you could take the message back to members of your own groups and candidates from your own parties that there will be a big commitment in terms of their time within that 6 days to get members signed up in terms of their declarations of acceptance of office, connected in terms of their IT, and then trained on council meetings before the AGM, then I think that's going to mean a big time commitment on their part.
Yeah.
So you know, if you could take that message back to your respective groups and maybe use your good offices to encourage that commitment. I know Councillor Watkins talked about changing any holidays or leave booked during that period. It would be extremely helpful to Leanne and Anne and the team if the new members could make themselves available during those 6 days to make sure we get it completed in time.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay. Yeah. Right. Well, I'm sure we'll take notice of that and report back accordingly. Okay. So that takes us on to the next item, which is member surveys, I believe, which is presentation update.
Thank you, Chair. Me again, I'm afraid. Can you see my screen?
Yes.
Right. Okay. So this update is to run through the member surveys, again, partially linked to the election, but partially linked to legislation, and just talk through some of the plans and get some comments back from the committee. So there are a number of requirements that have been discussed and are needed in the coming months. So one of them is around an exit survey. So this aims to understand the experience of members for those who are not choosing to stand for election again. Trying to get some feedback on what those reasons may be and how we might be able to improve member support in the future. This is linked into the participation strategy. It supports that aim of looking at widening the representation of elected members and perhaps understanding some of the reasons why members may not wish to stand for election in further elections. The second one is around an ethical standards exit survey. So this aims to support behaviour and standards of elected members. It's something that has been raised as part of the standards committee. The third survey is a diversity survey, and again this is heavily linked to the participation strategy. So the aim of this one would be to establish the demographic profile of the current council membership. This would then create a baseline of the qualities and diversity data for those elected and independent members. This will then enable comparative assessments with data collected following the 2022 local government elections and going forward in the future. The final survey to be discussed today is the candidate survey linked to the local elections in May. This is a legal requirement under Section 1 of the Local Government Wales Measure 2011 that needs to be conducted for councillors and unsuccessful candidates for both the local and any community council elections. So the member survey I thought would be useful, the exit survey, to go into a little bit more detail and just get some feedback from the committee on this. So the questions will be things like, how long have you served as a council? What roles and positions have you held? Are you standing for re-election? And then if no, there would be some tick boxes on understanding why that person may not be standing again. Also trying to get some feedback on changes and improvements that could be in place to discourage elected members from standing down. What councillors have enjoyed most and least about their role, and then again what additional support and assistance might have been useful in helping them to fulfil their roles as a member of the council. Also finding out about that induction and training provided to members, so trying to get some feedback on that, whether there were other opportunities that members feel could have been made available to them. And then some questions around group support, so finding out about whether they were able to effectively fulfil their role through that support, if they had any additional support that they thought could be provided by the group to its members. And then it goes to touch on unacceptable behaviours. So again, linking into the ethics and standards element, so have they experienced any, had they witnessed any, and whether those incidents were reported. And also to try and find something out about whether there's anything members felt could be done to stop or prevent unethical behaviours in the future. This survey also includes equality monitoring questions, which are standard questions included in surveys to understand the demographics of the people completing the survey. So important to note with the survey, this would be completely confidential. Any findings shared as an aggregate of the data would be anonymised. The second survey is being developed through the Standards Committee and will be tailored to Newport City Council. Link to further development of standards training for members. Again, this one is confidential and the findings would be anonymised. Thirdly, then the diversity survey. So this would ask questions specifically concerning the protected characteristics under the Equality Act. So these are things like sex, marital relationship, age, disability, but also with the new socio-economic duty, which asks questions such as whether people have dependents, care and responsibilities, their employment status and so forth. This survey would also ask questions relating to the Welsh and linked to the legislation relating to Welsh language provision in Wales. Again, confidential, completely confidential for anybody participating, and the findings would be anonymised. The last survey is candidate surveys. So the 2011 measure requires these surveys to ask prescribed questions of each member and candidate. So these have been conducted previously for the last two local elections, and the survey is conducted on behalf of local authorities through Data Cymru. However, Newport would get a set of data specifically about Newport that it could use, and then also gives us a set of data that can be compared to the All Wales data group. Again, this is a confidential survey and the findings would be anonymised. So I think there are some challenges, committee members, with the surveys. Obviously, there is some crossover between the requirements here, particularly demographic questions. I think there is a bit of a risk of having survey fatigue for members, particularly at what is going to be certainly a busy time for people. And I think there would be a bit of a challenge around getting a reasonable response rate so that the data set that we get back would be useful and objective. I think some of the things that we could do to look at this would be around perhaps reviewing the questions and considering where there may be a crossover. Perhaps there is an opportunity to consolidate at least 3 of those surveys to produce maybe one that would be a bit more palatable for members to complete. Excuse me. The Data Cymru survey is completely separate and that would be run in the normal way. There's not a way that we could consolidate that. So the timeline for this would be to review the questions and the survey related to the Ethical Standards Committee on the 10th of March. The Data Cymru candidate survey will go live from the 28th of March regardless. I think that's been through the period of consultation and that's almost ready to be shared. And then I think what we could do is bring back any final surveys to be reviewed as a report in the next Democratic Services Committee at the end of the month. And that concludes my presentation, Chair.
Thank you, Leanne. Well, committee comments, please. No comments? Come on. Kate, you got your hand up. Oh,
Yeah, just a question really. You mentioned about sort of survey fatigue. Are any of the questions or the areas of inquiry new, things which we won't have come across before? Has somebody had a bright idea and we really need to know how many councillors keep, you know?
I wouldn't say that there's areas that are new, but I think the new part this year is around the link that it does have to the wider participation strategy. So some of the data that we're capturing this time around would link into that and our monitoring and measuring of that.
Thank you.
right. Matthew.
Well, I think Leanne hit the nail on the head when she said people might get survey fatigue, and 4 surveys, quite frankly, is just ridiculous because you're not going to get the responses from people. Okay, there's one which is a separate body, but I would suggest we could combine, just have 1 survey instead of 3, and have areas, you know, a lot of the questions would be quite similar. Please don't go into too much detail. There'll be opportunities for people to comment of concerns or things which they thought went well, but there is a danger of just not getting people to actually fill them out, and then that defeats the object. So I think one page with the opportunity to put comments in, and you know, you said on the exit survey, well, how useful was your induction training? Well, that was 5 years ago. I don't know how many people can still remember their induction training from 5 years ago. If it's just a comment about general training, then that would be fine, and people can take on board. But I guess, you know, I personally think, as we said earlier, less is more, and you're more likely to get responses back if it is short and gives people the ability to add their concerns or things which they thought went well within it.
Thank you.
Yeah. Any more comments? No. All done then. Yep. So it will appear that there's no further comments. Yeah, if you note those observations, which I'm sure you'll do, Leanne, then that's fine. Okay. Though this takes us on to item 6, draft guidance on constitution.
Well, both the next 2 documents, Chair, are just for information purposes. We don't need any decision as such, because at the moment they're both draft documents. Well, we added in the agenda because they were issued by Welsh Government shortly before this agenda went out, so they're there largely for information purposes. We've mentioned to you before that Welsh Government intended producing revised guidance on the new governance arrangements in the light of this. They've also updated some of the previous guidance in terms of scrutiny committees and so on under the 2011 measure. But yeah, both those documents are there for information purposes at this stage. There's no decision required. But if members have got any questions, then we're happy to pick those up.
Right. Okay. Are we going to have a presentation of them, or do we just want the comments on what we've read?
They are just there purely for information purposes. If members have got any questions, having read the documents, then we're happy to pick those up. But there's no presentation.
Right.
Chair, I did raise my hand. Could I just ask Mr. Price, when he says we're happy to pick up the questions, does he mean that he'll try to answer them, or the questions will be forwarded to the Welsh Assembly Government?
It depends what the questions are. If it's comments on the draft documentation, then we're happy to pass those on to Welsh Government.
Thank you.
Right, Trevor?
Yeah, just a point of clarification, if Gareth Price can actually answer it. We were discussing earlier about assistance, political assistance. Where will that budget come from? Will that come from the groups, the political groups, or will it come from council or Welsh Government?
the council would have to pay for the political group advisors if the new council was minded to appoint them.
Okay, I just want to make sure of where it was coming. Would the council get funding from Welsh Government for that, or does it come out of the original budget?
No, it comes out of the original budget. It's part of the staffing budget. You would have to set money aside as part of the council's staffing budget to pay for these political assistants. So even though they're aligned to and work to the political groups on the council, their salaries would be paid for by the council.
Okay.
And there would be no additional funding for that.
Thank you.
Any more on this?
If I might, Chair.
Yeah, please do.
The political advisors, would they be pro rata to the number of seats that each group? So there would be one. If you've got more than the minimum, which is five councillors, you would get exactly the same.
Well, it's 10%. It's the same with special responsibility allowances or senior salaries for group leaders. As a group, even though you only need 2 people to constitute a group for the purpose of allocation of seats, in terms of any senior salaries, or in terms of qualifying for a political assistant, the group has to have at least 10% of the seats on the council. Now, at the moment, that would be five seats. The council will go up to 51 members from May, so not less than 10 would mean 6 members in each of the groups. So there'd have to be 6 members within each of the political groups for there to be political assistants. You could have up to 3. So the 3 largest parties, provided you had more than 6 members in each of those opposition and major parties, would qualify for a political advisor.
Thank you.
But it's not proportionate to numbers of seats. Each group, each of those 3 major groups, as long as they had more than 6 members, would qualify for a single political advisor.
Thank you.
I was curious about section 56 is on pages 18 to 19, which gives delegated powers for various things. Is that something new?
No. So a lot of this advice is a restatement of previous advice under the 2011 measure, and the actual delegation goes back to the Local Government Act 2000. So this is largely advisory. A lot of this the council can do already. This is not as a result of the new Local Government and Elections Act. This is a restatement of previous guidance.
And are we implementing this section 56 at the moment? No.
No.
But could do.
This is largely for many councils. They have area committees and delegated budgets for areas within communities. Our scheme of delegation is purely to cabinet members and to officers. Right.
Can I ask again? Page 35, co-option of non-members onto non-members of local authorities onto scrutiny committees, I assume, on page 35. Are we doing that, or have we done that? We are doing that.
Yeah, I've done since 2000 because that's a requirement of the Local Government Act. So, for example, with education scrutiny, there's the scrutiny committee that deals with education. There are statutory co-opted members on that particular scrutiny committee.
Okay. And of course, it does say that we should on page 52 publish our forward work programs. Do we do that?
Yes. Well, that's what you agree in every meeting.
Yeah.
Every meeting where every committee and council agrees its forward work program, then that's obviously a public document.
Yeah, and that's of course on the website. Should people want to go and see it?
That's correct. Yes.
Yeah. So it's had the sort of mental image of sort of hard copies being printed and distributed, but no. So it would be all done electronically. Yeah.
Yes.
Right. Okay then. Last but not least, joint oversee and scrutiny committees. I think we were involved with that at one point with procurement with Caerphilly. Are we still doing that, joint scrutiny committees?
We have a number of joint scrutiny committees because obviously the more collaboration you've got, then the more joint committees that you've you've got. Certainly with corporate joint committees, regional scrutiny or joint scrutiny will be a big thing. You're looking at establishing a joint scrutiny committee for the Public Services Board, because that's gone regional now. So as more and more of these services are delivered on a regional basis through collaboration, then what you will have is regional scrutiny. And to do that, you will set up a joint scrutiny committee of all the participating councils. So you will see more and more of this as we move towards collaboration and joint delivery of services.
So it's been a long-held aspiration, really, and it's starting to come into practice, yeah?
Well, the ability to set up joint scrutiny committees has been there since, since the Local Government Act, but certainly since the 2011 measure. So it's always been there. The need to set them up has probably developed more recently in the past few years as we've moved towards regional, regional collaboration.
I think I've got Trevor now. Trevor?
Yes, thank you, Chair. This is a draft copy, which we've got, Gareth. Can individual members comment on this? To whom? Welsh Government or Newport City Council?
Well, if you want to comment, if you send the comments back to us, then we're quite happy to send those off to Welsh Government. But please bear in mind, like I said, that a lot of this is just a restatement of legislation that's been enforced for years.
Yeah.
So what they're looking at really is comments on any technical aspects of the guidance, and particularly in relation to the new provisions in the 2021 Act. So a lot of this guidance will relate back, certainly the guidance on scrutiny committees, that will date back years, and a lot of it is based on legislation, so that isn't going to change. But if you could sort of relate your comments to any technical aspects of the drafting and more particularly the new legislative provisions.
Okay.
But yeah, if members want to comment on that and want to send them back through Democratic Services, we're happy to coordinate that and send off collective comments to Welsh Government.
Lovely. Thank you, Gareth. Thank you.
Thank you. Right. Anybody else? No? No? Well, I think we've said all we can say. We've then got the Democracy Handbook.
So the same principle, Chair. Again, that's a draft document that's been released by Welsh Government. We've mentioned this to you before, in terms of trying to bring together, advice for members in terms of how governance works, and this is the first draft. More is to follow, and I think before the final version is issued, there'll be a number of iterations of this. So again, at the moment, it's there for information purposes. It will change, and it probably will be amended. But again, if members have got any questions or comments, then we're happy to pick those up.
Any thoughts, please, committee? No? Trevor?
Thank you, Chair. Another question for Gareth. Is there any timeline on these two documents, Gareth?
In terms of the consultation, no, we haven't been given a formal consultation period on these particular documents. Strangely, some of the other consultations that are coming out now, on Standards Committee, for example, and duties on group leaders, the consultation period ends sometime in May after the elections. So it looks like we're not going to get a final version of lots of these documents before the elections. So we'll have to work on the current drafts in terms of what we're preparing with the Constitution and the various strategies that we've got to sign off between now and May. So no, there's no timescale on these, but obviously the sooner we respond, the better.
What I'm concerned about, if it's after the election, then there's more pressure on new candidates, which are possibly being elected on May the 6th. It's another pressure on them.
Well, there shouldn't be a pressure on the candidates themselves. I mean, at the end of the day, this is about the governance processes and making sure that we've got that correct. Now, what we'll do, I mean, because of the amount of work that needs to be carried out between now and May, we will just ensure that the basics are in place to make sure that your current constitution and your governance arrangements meet the basic statutory requirements. We touched upon petition schemes earlier. I think the best that we'll have in place by May is a very basic policy. But then the new council, the new Democratic Services Committee after may want to sit down and refine and improve those documents. Because as we said before, both in terms of the participation strategy, the petition strategy, they're dynamic documents. We don't just sort of finalise them once and for all and it just sits there for 5 years. They're constantly under review and constantly being refined and improved. So what we're going to try and do is get the basic building blocks in place by May, and then leave it to the new council post-May and the new Democratic Services Committee to come back and maybe have a look at those documents in more detail and see what needs to be improved.
Okay, lovely. Thank you, Gareth.
Thanks.
Any more comments, please? I'd like to comment on page 79 that made the point that training is a process and not an event. And I think that's very that's a pearl of wisdom, yeah. And we shouldn't look upon it as a review of performance. Also covered in here is a receipt of petitions, and I think that's something that we could revisit. There we are.
Yeah, I just touched on that, Chair. I mean, clearly that advice has only just come out, but we'll take that into account when we develop a petition scheme or policy that we can bring before you, hopefully in the next meeting in March. So we've got something. It probably won't be the finished article, because obviously this guidance hasn't been finalised yet, and it's something that certainly in terms of your approach to petitions, the new council may want to revisit post-May. But what we'll try and do is have a basic petition scheme in place that we can bring to you for approval in March.
Thank you. Well, I think that's it, more or less. What are we? Date of next meeting, isn't it? Is that the next thing we've got to do?
Yes, Chair. So we've got Wednesday, the 30th of March, 10 AM to 12 PM.
Yeah, Wednesday, 30th of March. Wait a minute, where are we? Yep, okay, yeah, that's fine with me.
Brilliant, thank you.
And I think that's, apart from thanking you all for attending, and those of you on earlier will be pleased to know that the hedgehog has run away of its own accord. There we are. Okay, there we are. Well, thank you one and all, and see you on the 30th of March, if not before. And thank you very much to all the officers for all the help and clarity they've given us this morning. Thank you.
Bye-bye.